For weeks, one figure has dominated conversations surrounding the Invictus Games and the organization connected to Prince Harry. Across video platforms, social media posts, and countless opinion pieces, the same number appears again and again: $63.2 million. Commentators present it as undeniable evidence that the Invictus organization is facing financial collapse. The number is repeated so frequently that many people have accepted it without question. Yet the reality behind that headline is far more complicated, and arguably far more concerning. The first issue is simple. The widely quoted figure does not belong to the charity most people believe it does. The $63.2 million amount was connected to a separate organizing committee responsible for hosting a specific sporting event. That entity existed to stage a single edition of the Games and operated independently from the foundation that oversees the Invictus movement. Once the event concluded, that organization completed its financial obligations and closed its books. The actual foundation established to oversee the Invictus mission filed its own financial reports with regulators in the United Kingdom. Those documents tell a very different story. According to the foundation's publicly available accounts, annual income was approximately £3.8 million, not $63.2 million. While this figure is dramatically smaller than the one dominating online discussions, it is the correct number for evaluating the foundation's financial position. That raises an important question. Why are so many commentators focusing on a figure associated with a completely different organization, while overlooking the financial statements filed by the foundation itself? The answer may be that larger numbers attract more attention. Massive figures create dramatic headlines. They generate clicks, shares, and emotional reactions. Smaller numbers require closer examination. They demand patience, context, and an understanding of financial reporting. Yet the genuine story may be found inside those smaller numbers. A closer review of the foundation's filings reveals something that deserves significantly more attention than sensational headlines. During the reporting period, overall income increased. Financial reserves also grew. On the surface, those developments would appear positive. A charity with rising income and expanding reserves typically signals stability and growth. However, another figure moved in the opposite direction. The amount directed toward grants and support benefiting veterans reportedly fell sharply during the same period. While the foundation's resources increased, funding flowing directly to organizations serving wounded veterans declined substantially. This contrast creates a difficult question for observers, donors, and stakeholders alike. If more money entered the organization, why did less money appear to reach the beneficiaries the charity was established to support? This issue receives far less attention than celebrity gossip, public appearances, or ongoing royal controversies. Discussions about clothing budgets, family disputes, and media narratives often dominate headlines. Meanwhile, financial information contained within official regulatory filings receives comparatively little scrutiny. That imbalance is what makes this situation noteworthy. For years, the Invictus brand enjoyed an extraordinary level of public goodwill. The mission was compelling and widely admired. Supporting wounded military personnel through adaptive sports represented a cause few people wished to criticize. The organization's purpose transcended politics and celebrity culture. It focused on resilience, recovery, and community. Because of that reputation, many observers were reluctant to ask difficult questions. Criticizing a charity connected to injured veterans risked appearing insensitive or unfair. As a result, the organization largely avoided the kind of detailed financial examination routinely applied to other public institutions. What changed was not a leak, a scandal, or an insider revelation. The change occurred because the foundation filed its accounts. Financial statements submitted to regulators become public records. Once those records enter public databases, anyone can review them. Journalists, analysts, donors, and ordinary members of the public gain access to the same information. No anonymous source is required. No hidden document must be uncovered. The facts are available for examination. That distinction matters. Much of today's media environment depends heavily on unnamed insiders, speculative reporting, and unverified claims. Stories often begin with phrases such as sources close to the situation or according to individuals familiar with the matter. Those reports may sometimes prove accurate, but they remain difficult to verify independently. Financial filings are different. They represent official statements submitted under legal obligations and approved by trustees responsible for governance. While interpretation of the data may vary, the underlying figures originate from documents the organization itself has provided. The timing of these disclosures also coincided with several developments that attracted attention. Major funding relationships appeared to shift. Certain sponsors chose not to continue participation. Questions emerged regarding future financial commitments from various partners. At the same time, changes occurred within the organization's leadership and governance structure. Individually, none of these developments necessarily indicate wrongdoing. Organizations regularly experience leadership transitions, sponsorship changes, and evolving funding arrangements. Such events occur across the nonprofit sector every year. Collectively, however, they create a pattern that naturally attracts scrutiny. Observers begin asking whether these developments are connected. Are sponsors leaving because of financial concerns? Are governance changes related to strategic disagreements? Are funding decisions influenced by broader questions regarding organizational priorities? At present, definitive answers remain limited. What is clear is that the Foundation's own filings have shifted the conversation. The debate is no longer centered solely on personalities, royal drama, or social media speculation. Instead, attention has turned toward financial stewardship, governance decisions, and accountability. And that may be the most important development of all. The real story is not the dramatic headline figure repeated across countless videos. The real story begins when people stop repeating numbers they heard elsewhere and start examining the records themselves. Those records reveal a more nuanced picture, one that may ultimately prove far more significant than any viral claim circulating online. Once the confusion surrounding the widely circulated financial figures is set aside, a more significant issue comes into focus. The real concern is not whether one organization spent tens of millions of dollars staging an international sporting event. The more important question is what happened inside the foundation responsible for advancing the Invictus mission and supporting wounded veterans around the world. Financial reports often tell stories that headlines miss. A single number can create outrage, but the relationship between several numbers often reveals a much deeper truth. In this case, the most striking detail is not how much money entered the organization. It is how the money was distributed after it arrived. According to publicly available filings, the foundation experienced an increase in income during the reporting period. At the same time, its reserves also grew. Under normal circumstances, those developments would be viewed as signs of financial strength. Donors generally want to see an organization remain stable and maintain sufficient reserves to protect itself against future uncertainty. Financial security allows charities to plan ahead, invest in programs, and continue serving beneficiaries during difficult periods. However, another figure moved sharply downward. The amount reportedly distributed through grants and direct support to veteran-focused organizations declined dramatically. While income increased and reserves expanded, funding reaching frontline organizations fell significantly. That contrast immediately raises questions about priorities, resource allocation, and long-term strategy. For many observers, this is where the discussion becomes far more important than celebrity headlines or internet rumors. Charities exist for a purpose. Every nonprofit organization is created to fulfill a mission. Donors contribute because they believe their money will advance that mission. Trustees oversee operations to ensure resources are directed toward stated objectives. When the proportion of funds reaching beneficiaries declines, stakeholders naturally want to understand why. That does not automatically indicate misconduct. There are legitimate reasons why grant distributions might decrease during a specific year. An organization may be restructuring programs, investing in future initiatives, expanding infrastructure, or preparing for upcoming projects. Financial decisions often involve considerations that are not immediately visible in annual reports. Nevertheless, transparency becomes essential. When supporters see rising income paired with declining frontline support, they expect clear explanations. Without those explanations, uncertainty fills the gap. Questions emerge, speculation grows, confidence begins to weaken. The situation becomes even more sensitive when leadership changes occur during the same period. Nonprofit organizations rely heavily on governance. Strong governance reassures donors that resources are being managed responsibly. Experienced board members provide oversight, challenge executive decisions, and help maintain accountability. Their presence signals stability and professionalism. When respected governance figures depart unexpectedly, observers often pay attention. One departure attracted particular interest because of the individual's extensive experience in charity leadership and public service administration. The board member brought decades of expertise in governance, funding oversight, and nonprofit management. By most accounts, her appointment had been viewed as a positive development for the organization. Then, after a relatively short period, she stepped away. The official explanation cited personal priorities and commitments elsewhere. Such explanations are common and often entirely accurate. Professionals frequently balance multiple responsibilities and occasionally choose to focus their time in different areas. Yet timing matters. Her departure occurred amid broader discussions regarding funding challenges and organizational finances. Because those events happened close together, questions naturally followed. Was the resignation connected to strategic disagreements? Did governance concerns influence the decision? Or was it simply a routine personal choice that happened to coincide with unrelated developments? Publicly available information does not provide definitive answers. What it does provide is another example of how governance events can influence perceptions. In the nonprofit sector, perception carries enormous weight. Trust is often the organization's most valuable asset. Once confidence begins to weaken, restoring it can become difficult. The funding environment surrounding the Invictus movement also appears to have shifted during this period. Major corporate sponsors are essential for large-scale international events. Their contributions help finance venues, logistics, athlete support services, transportation, and countless operational requirements. Securing sponsorships requires organizations to demonstrate credibility, effectiveness, and strong governance. When significant sponsors decide not to continue involvement, observers naturally notice. Sponsors rarely explain every detail behind their decisions. Companies evaluate partnerships using numerous factors, including budget priorities, marketing objectives, economic conditions, and strategic planning. A sponsor's departure does not necessarily imply dissatisfaction. However, when multiple funding relationships cool within a relatively short period, questions become harder to ignore. Corporate partners watch one another carefully. They monitor industry perceptions, governance developments, and public sentiment. In many cases, one sponsor's decision can influence others. Organizations seeking long-term financial stability understand this dynamic well. The challenge becomes even greater when future events require substantial funding commitments. Large international sporting competitions are expensive undertakings. Facilities must be secured, staff must be hired, athletes must be accommodated. Security, transportation, medical services, communications, and operational logistics create enormous financial demands. Meeting those obligations requires confidence from donors, sponsors, governments, and supporters. If confidence weakens, fundraising becomes more difficult. This is why governance signals matter so much. Organizations do not lose support only because of legal findings or regulatory investigations. Often, financial consequences arrive much earlier. Stakeholders make decisions based on risk assessments, public information, and future expectations. In many cases, perception influences outcomes before regulators ever become involved. That reality helps explain why financial filings receive such attention. Annual accounts may appear technical and uninteresting, but they serve as one of the most important tools for evaluating organizational health. They provide insight into priorities, spending patterns, reserves, and operational strategy. More importantly, they create accountability. Donors deserve to know how resources are being used. Beneficiaries deserve confidence that programs remain adequately funded. Trustees have a duty to ensure charitable objectives remain central to decision-making. The debate surrounding the Invictus Foundation ultimately extends beyond any single financial report. It raises broader questions about nonprofit accountability, governance standards, and public trust. At its heart, the issue remains surprisingly simple. If an organization receives more money, builds larger reserves, and simultaneously reduces the amount reaching frontline beneficiaries, supporters will want answers. Those answers may be entirely reasonable. They may reflect strategic planning, future investments, or operational realities. But until those explanations are clearly understood, the questions will continue. And those questions, not celebrity controversies, internet rumors, or viral headlines, are what truly define the conversation surrounding the Foundation's future.